Ray Buxton was the last of 10 children from his father's 2 marriages. Benjamin Buxton built sea walls around Britain's coast, but when war came, his youngest son was quick to volunteer to defend the country against its deadliest threat. The 29-year-old insurance clerk, who his headmaster had described as capable, honest, painstaking, and persevering, had been a sergeant in the school cadet corps. On October the 9th, 1939, he swore to defend the Crown against all enemies and was recruited into the Royal West Kent Regiment. He thrived in khaki, and it was a chance meeting with, of all people, First World War Commander Lord Kitchener, who advised him to transfer into the Royal Scots Fusiliers. That meant he proudly wore their distinctive Glengarry headgear for the rest of his service. He was soon promoted captain, and despite getting precious little leave, was able to meet and court Pat, daughter of the regiment's chaplain, whom he encountered during training in Norfolk. Like so many wartime weddings, their ceremony was a brief splash of colour and gaiety amid the drab austerity of total war. A year later, the first of their 3 children was born, although with Pat needing to request an official rail warrant to cross the country to visit Ray's new posting, it was several months before he was able to spend more than 15 minutes with his son. By 1943, Ray had transferred into the specialist field of aerial reconnaissance. As part of the Photographic Intelligence Unit of 35 Air Wing, he was assigned to work on many high-risk sorties over strongly defended targets, flying occasionally as an observer on a number of missions. He was especially proud to have helped slow down the Nazis' development of rockets, which could have altered the war's outcome. Arduous, long-range missions over Peenemünde on the Baltic coast helped RAF bombers target Hitler's missile factories. His burgeoning career could have ended in disaster, however, when he left a top-secret invasion map behind on weekend leave. Pat caught the next train and reunited a very anxious Ray with the precious file. Preparing for the coming liberation of occupied Europe was the top priority, and hard-won imagery of shoreline defences, like these tank traps, was crucial in saving many lives. But Ray didn't wait safely in Britain as the beachheads were stormed. D-Day commanders were eager to keep their eyes in the skies closest to the fighting. So on June the 6th, 1944, Ray and his team splashed ashore at Ouistreham, codenamed Sword Beach, 14 hours behind the first assault, and after a crossing he described as foul. 2 days later, his first letter home echoed what thousands of others were writing.
I'm sorry I had to be so very mysterious about my movements, and it hurts so much to deceive you. But I'm sure you'll understand, and I pray that the invasion news wasn't too great a shock. God, how I long for a bath and a comfortable bed. We all sleep in foxholes. At least we stay there during the night, not because they're comfortable, but for obvious reasons. The noise at times is simply fantastic. It's so good to see the Luftwaffe chased and shot out of the sky all day long. Darling, the grimness of war is simply staggering and makes one so very hard-hearted and callous. But on the other hand, one sees such a great spirit amongst the chaps that one feels proud to be with them.
3 days later, in his next letter, he was getting used to the rigours of life under fire, but starting to have mixed feelings about those they were liberating.
And we find it hard to decide who are for or against us. They're quite unconcerned about shells and bombing and try to live their normal lives as far as possible. I envy their nonchalance, and I wish I felt the same. I get the complete jitters during every raid.
He survived Normandy, and as the Germans fell back, his unit even fitted in a spot of aerial sightseeing over liberated Paris. As the Allies fought their way into the fatherland itself, he provided reconnaissance over the glider-borne crossing of the Rhine just 2 months before VE Day. and helped document the massive bombing damage to towns and cities. As a souvenir of the time when at last the fighting stopped, he kept this copy of his unit's signal announcing Germany's unconditional surrender, a message millions must have longed to hear and tens of thousands had died to achieve. Like most wartime brides, at home Pat had to rely on these pre-printed official postcards for reassurance that their loved ones were safe. Those on active duty were forbidden to write anything on them, only to cross out any of the statements that did not apply to them. She had to wait until months after the war ended for confirmation that he was finally coming home. It arrived in this flimsy telegram that she treasured. In November 1945, Ray received his official release papers from duty. He'd enjoyed life in uniform and might have followed a career in the military, but he also felt he owed an obligation to his employers, the Sun Alliance, who had kept open his pre-war job. So he packed away his Glengarry and devoted the rest of his days to his family and to St Albans, his adopted and much-loved home, where his loyal devotion to Old Albanians rugby was rewarded with his election as club president. He spoke little about the history he had witnessed and helped to make. He had done his bit, and that was enough. His family miss him still. He served them, his country, and his community, an epitaph of which this modest man would be justly proud.